Mr. Cotton.
Secretary Barrett, General Goldfein, thank you for your appearance here again today. General Goldfein, I want to go back to something you said in your opening statement. I want to see if we can put it a little more bluntly and just not beat around the bush on it. You and Secretary Barrett and your whole team have done a lot to try to identify what our Air Force needs to fight the future fight. And that's going to require some divestment, some cuts in current programs. And the issue is that over here in current programs, you got a bunch of stuff that flies around right now that we can all see. Or maybe more importantly, that sits on the ground in our states and employs people in our states. And over here, you have a bunch of stuff that is super secret, very classified, very cutting edge, that we can't see. Is that right? So you're talking about making cuts to the stuff that we can see and spending money on the stuff we can't see. Is that the crux of the matter that you're getting at?
Yes, sir.
I don't think anyone doubts that we need all this super secret stuff over here. We've had a number of hearings on it. We created a Space Force in part to address it. I just think it's important that we lay that out there and make it very plain, so when we get down to brass tacks on the NDAA or we get down to brass tacks on the defense spending bill, that we all on this panel remember, and that the other senators in the Senate remember, that the secret stuff is very needful. And the public stuff that has been with us for a long time and very comfortable may need to be trimmed back to pay for the secret stuff. And that's not a strategy issue. That's a political issue for all of us to deal with. And that's not endorsing any single kind of cut that you may have to make here or any single kind of program you may spend here. We may have different thoughts on that. We may want to tinker around the edges. But I think it's really clear that we just be upfront about the dilemma that the Air Force faces, which is at root a political dilemma that we all should handle in a responsible and sober fashion, given the threats that we face in the future.
Thanks, sir.
I now want to speak about spectrum, specifically the mid-band spectrum. Secretary Esper said that DoD is willing to explore sharing that spectrum, and we know that some of your systems like AWACS operate there. Can you talk to us about what mid-band capabilities that you're concerned about and how critical the spectrum is to those capabilities? I'll throw that open to either one of you that want to go.
Yes, sir. And I'll back up exactly what Secretary Esper says. We cannot vacate, but we can look at sharing. It does affect, in the mid-band, our AWACS and other command and control assets, and it certainly impacts where we're going with battlefield networks. But we do think that there's a strategy ahead for sharing.
So talk to us a little bit more about what not vacating but sharing would look like.
Meaning we've still got to, we have to operate in that spectrum. So there may be ways to parcel and share some portions of it, but we cannot leave it. And there are some that are asking us to give that up, and that is not something I could ever advise you to do.
Okay. Secretary Barrett, did you want to?
I would just say that sharing it has to be, the only sharing we can do is a sharing where the fidelity of our signals is not intruded. So they have to, what use others would have of it can only be made where it does not intrude in the signal that we're using.
Okay. Any thoughts on kind of costs we're looking at here?
So I know that they're taking a look at it. I've not seen any cost that I could give you yet. We can take that one in for the record if you like.
Yeah, please do. Secretary Barrett, did you want to add? Okay. One final question that's a related point. Unfortunately, some of our allies are moving forward with Huawei products in developing their 5G wireless systems, even in countries where we have some of your airmen positioned. What are your concerns about their personal and operational security if the countries in which they are based are developing 5G systems using Huawei products?
It's a great disappointment to have allies that are using Huawei. Alternatively, we have not been forthcoming with good alternatives to the Huawei system, so we need to up our game to have as competitive a system, a more competitive system, so that we are providing that. But it does put our signals at risk and our airmen at risk.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree that I'll say that we have not been particularly effective at providing alternatives. I mean, we, as I would say, the entire West, the United States government, allied governments, and our businesses, although I would say in all their defenses, it's hard to compete against a company like Huawei which is an arm of the Chinese Communist Party and enjoys effectively unlimited subsidies. So when our allies are saying things like, well, we have to go with a reasonable cost provider, the only reason Huawei is a reasonable cost provider is not that they are the best company or they have the brightest minds or the most effective manufacturing techniques. It's because their bills are paid by the Chinese Communist Party. And that's something that we as policymakers should take into account when we're trying to identify possible alternatives. General, I know this is your last posture hearing. Maybe it won't be your last hearing. I'm sure you hope it is. But if it's not, it's been an honor to be able to serve with you these last few years, and we thank you for your service to the nation.